Most of you will probably be familiar with the school or have been here before, but for those who haven't, um, our school is, well, we constantly struggle to explain it in a short way. Our school is a school for persons who have already been to school, who already have a diploma, who already have a job and worked somewhere, but who long to improve themselves as urbanists in the widest sense of the word. So it can be, you can be a photographer, a sociologist, a historian, a planner, a designer of sorts. And for all of you, we have a program that is hopefully interesting. We have the next two schools out, which is always on the last Friday of the month. Next 8 October 28, we have the Amsterdam Office of Sight Practice. And in November, we have guests from the UK, which are Adam Nathaniel Furman and Joshua Mardell. Together they wrote a book on queer spaces, and that will also be the topic of their talk in November. We also have a new series which is more research based. So we have asked a couple of, well, the first one is Marina Otero, a researcher who has recently won the Wainwright Prize and whose study is on data centers, the architecture of data centers. And we have asked her to invite a couple of people that she thinks are interesting and that she will introduce, and that will be our guests on 3 consecutive dates in October and November. So it's called Future Storage. And this is already starting next week. With the fabulous Charlie Koolhaas, we're doing a research by photography series, 2 days after 7 and 8, and then the next week, 14 and 15th of October. And it's called the Rotterdam Dream, which is, of course, an analogy with the American dream, based on the assumption that Rotterdam is the most American city in the Netherlands, and that both in youth culture, in music, in architecture, you can find a lot of things that have been imported from the US, and we'll dive deep into that, hopefully. Most of all as an experience, but also as a, well, if you want, as a critique. That's up to the participants in this workshop. And then in November, we're doing a workshop called the Post-Growth City, which we are doing together with the urban planning offices of Bura Urbanism. It's a 1-week studio, and it is exploring urbanization beyond growth, beyond not physical growth, but beyond economic growth. So what can the city be like when we don't put finance and economic growth and profit in the center of thinking about the city? And then in December, we are doing a workshop which is in the series of the do-it-yourself workshops that we have been doing for the last years. We've been pouring concrete, we've been making rammed earth, we have we made this urban tissue in a weaving workshop with artists, and the Vyshyvanka workshop is circling around we're doing this with an Ukrainian architect, is circling around the embroidery, which is traditional to Ukraine, called Vyshyvanka. And the interesting thing is that it is a kind of a language that you can learn how to read and apply. And this tradition is not just a blank tradition, it's also a form of resistance, as it is so strongly attached to the identity of Ukraine at this moment. And then, this is something that we're starting to do next year in February, but the deadline to apply for this is already December 1st. So yeah, don't be too late with if you want to do this. This is our longest course, Dirty Old Town. It's a 3-month course into contemporary urbanism, and it is based on the 3 main themes of the school: the Anthropocene, superdiversity, and access to the city. And you can find all information on these workshops on our website, or you can also ask us afterwards if you want to know some more about it or want to apply. So that's the program for the next month. Now, yeah, I'd like to introduce Tjeerd Veenhoven. I think from my explanation of the program, you will probably have heard that we have chosen our themes because of, well, the importance, the relevance, and because of the way that we feel things need to change. I'm not saying something very unique. This is the topic that I hear around me all the time. Like, how will things change? We need to change, but yeah, how are we going to do that? And it may be my character, but I also don't think I'm the only one who is becoming impatient, because it takes so long, and there's so many things that need to happen, and well, there's just very tiny steps, baby steps being taken, and this impatience fuels our program, and it has also, yeah, it's also one of the reasons behind the invitation for Tjeerd Veenhoven. Actually, we never met like today. We only met last year on Zoom, when I was doing a sort of a series of interviews, because the Creative Industries Fund, the Stimuleringsfonds Creatieve Industrie, they asked me to investigate what kind of innovations were necessary in our country in the field of architecture and planning. And I talked to a number of people then for inspiration and ideas. And I think my main conclusion was then that there is no lack of ideas on innovation in the Netherlands. It's really amazing what you find if you talk to designers, to architects. There is people who are devising methods that will completely change the building industry. There is groups of people who are taking over from the usual suspects in building assignments. Think of housing corporations. There is people working on bio-based materials. There is, well, you name it, there is a lot of ideas that are going around in the Netherlands, and that I wasn't so familiar with. So this is something that is quite well known. There is a lot of creativity in the Netherlands, but the gap between ideas and practice is huge. This gap, this ravine, which is so deep that is really the question. How can we bridge that gap? And when I was talking to Tjeerd, I think you then put the emphasis on the importance of not only coming up with ideas, but especially how to connect with different parties, with companies, and how to design for the whole value chain. And so this was a very business-like approach to these new ideas that I thought was, yeah, maybe very logical, but yeah, very useful. And that was actually the reason that we wanted to invite you here. Tjeerd Veenhoven is an industrial designer. I just asked about your training. You was educated in the art academies in Groningen and Arnhem, but I don't think that left a very lasting imprint. Yeah, a long time ago, forgot all about it. And so you've had your office for a long time already, based in Groningen, our home base of, well, that's the home base of Crimson, basically, where we all come from. So that's a special plus. What else should I say? Well, the thing is that I think the importance is that many of his projects are self-initiated as well as commissions, and they all have to do with using existing materials in a completely different way, whether it's tulips or whether it's algae or mycelium or lisdodder, which is a plant that I don't know how to translate. Or cellulose. Well, I'm sure that you will tell something about that. So yeah, I thought it was inspiring, and that's why we wanted to share Tjeerd with you. Here you go.
All right, we do a little bit technical shuffling here. Well, thanks for the nice intro. That's very nice. All the way from Groningen, indeed. So that's quite nice. I was a little bit tired, but now I'm ramping up again. It's the energy levels are back, and I might gonna do this without any connection. But let's just give it a try. There it is, perfect. Let's start at the beginning. That makes more sense. Oh, exactly. There we go. All right. I guess a little bit more introduction is wise. Indeed, I've been doing my own practice for 22 years now, so that's quite a substantial time. Indeed, when I did my art school, I think in that period it was already quite clear that I wouldn't really find a right connection at that time. I wasn't aware of that lack of connection, but over the years I kind of thought that, okay, it's clear that I wasn't really able to learn the things I was supposed to learn at that time. Indeed, I do a lot of self-initiated projects. I'm a material researcher. I'm a product designer. And typically my specialty is designing whole value chains, whole systems, from raw materials all the way to consumer use, and of course beyond, because all the products you'll see, life of this product definitely continues after you've used it. And this is one of the important things in my projects. So indeed, we do a lot of commissioned work as well, which is fantastic that nowadays companies seek this type of designers to help them in this sustainable transition. It's very difficult to do a sustainable transition for many companies. 99% of us are still linear, even though we talk a lot about circularity. I haven't found any process or product that is circular. So if somebody knows one, tell me. And definitely it's always a loss of energy, entropy. At the end of the day, it is really difficult to be circular. However, we can extend a lot of these things in order to extend our presence on this planet, and especially taking good care of the raw materials that we work with, and is something I specialize in. It's also filled with disappointment, which I love to share with you, because that's exactly what this is about. My daily practice is full of disappointments, and that's indeed how I learn. And the first project is one of those big disappointments. It's about fabric, about textile, about fashion, and I can start. I like to do this with every lecture is a little questionnaire about sustainability in fashion. So who is wearing something second-hand? Hands up. Hands up for second-hand. Well, that's okay. Who is wearing something he or she borrowed for somebody else for tonight? A little party piece, a little dress. Nobody borrowed something? All right. Who is wearing something that used to be from his mother or grandfather or something he inherited? Can I ask what it is? Is it? Oh, yeah? Oh, that's excellent. Does he know? Exactly, that's good. Is anybody wearing something that is handmade, self-made, something you created? And what would that be? The scarf. It's quite often a scarf. It's within our capacity to make scarf. But perhaps you are also a fashion designer, so I don't want to insult you, but typically it's about scarf. Anybody else was wearing something that was self-made? All right. Ah, yeah. What? Oh, aye. Exactly. Anybody bought something new, specifically for me, for tonight? Nobody. Well, that's okay. Well, so in general, so fashion is the most complicated, the biggest challenge we have sustainability-wise. It's not about cars, it's not about energy, it's actually about fashion, because it's such a monster. We have no idea how big this is. And it's closely connected to our identity. We love fashion, we need fashion. Without fashion, we are really just, entities that can't really express the way we feel about things. So I love fashion. I'm a shoe collector. I have many, many shoes. They're all secondhand. I never buy new shoes. I always buy secondhand shoes, which is for some people is disgusting, but I got used to it, and actually I enjoy the experience. Let's not, okay. Anyway. So this is, so you should know that 90% of our clothes is being incinerated. Everybody who talks about recycling, at the moment, at this specific moment, 90 to 95% of all our clothing is being incinerated, which is a waste, because we have the cottons, we have the polyesters, we have nylons, we have other beautiful materials that are basically in linear models just being incinerated for energy, if you're lucky. And sometimes the landfill, which is even worse. I mean, in Holland, we take good care of our waste. We incinerate it properly. We don't throw it in the ocean. But in many other countries, it's just shoved into a landfill and etc., which is, of course, very harmful. So I was asked, or I participated in the Global Change Award, an HMM, one of these monsters, an HMM award, and many people send in something, and I said, okay, I want to make something that is not land-based. Of course, cotton, as we use, is based on a plant growing on land, needing water, needing nutrients. And I thought, this is a little bit silly. We need something, we need land for food, so we should focus on something else, which is algae. And I'm a big fan of algae, and algae have an amazing capacity to double in volume overnight if the temperature and climate and light is good. So I imagine waking up on your beach and you're seeing this. I mean, that must be a bit of a disappointment. However, for me as a, as an algae lover, as a potential algae farmer, this is just makes me very happy, because this is my raw material right there. That's why I think algae are so interesting. They are huge CO2 absorbers, and they convert. Most of our CO2 is actually blown to the ocean. So what happens there? It gets saturated in the sea, and then a lot of algae convert this again to useful materials. This is a specific algae. It's called the cladophora. And the cladophora has something unique, which not many algae have. It has a lot of cellulose. And cellulose, of course, important, because cotton, Mother Nature has designed this very well. Cotton is 90% cellulose, and it's a beautiful fiber. The only thing you have to do is just pick it and basically twine it, and you have yarn. So that is quite amazing. So we want to try, if we want to try and get rid of cotton, we need to get the cellulose from other organic sources and convert it in a artificial way, due to technology. And this is what I wanted to do with the algae, because this is already happening. I don't know if anybody knows Tencel. All right, Tencel is also artificial cotton, right? It's from eucalyptus trees. And the pulp of that gets spun, the cellulose gets dissolved, and it gets spun into textile, which is fantastic. It's a very nice technology, and it's actually quite sustainable. However, it's still land-based. So instead of cotton fields, you will have a lot of eucalyptus, mainly, that is being grown in areas where you would also preferably grow other things. This doesn't mean that stem cell is bad. It's very good, but we can do even better. At least that's what I thought when I started working with algae. So what we do, we take the algae from the sea, either fresh or salt water. Saline water doesn't really matter, because we still have to wash it. We dry it, we pulverize it, and this is where I think the interesting part is we extract the cellulose from the material. So we want to get rid of the lignin, the hemicellulose, and the pectin and other components. And typically you would do this with quite heavy chemistry, because this is what you do if you want to extract cellulose. You use some quite aggressive chemicals to separate. This is an enzymatic separation, which I think is very, enzymes in your mouth, they perform simple tasks of separation of things, fats, etc., sugars. And this is basically the same idea. So we spend quite a lot of time finding out how we can separate the cellulose from algae without using too much temperature, too much toxins, and actually nature has, if you do it correctly, has some solutions for us in the enzymatic realm to do this. So the yield is not as good as chemically, but you have zero pollution, and it's a self-repeating process. So if you have the enzyme once working, then it will increase its volume, and you can have a reactor vat with enzymes, and you can repeat this process. So this was actually quite an important part, because we want to be sustainable, and you can have brilliant ideas. At least that's what designers often think. But when you start calculating the actual impact, you might end up with a conclusion that it's not sustainable at all. And I can guarantee you, I dare to guarantee you on experience that 9 out of 10 designer ideas are not so sustainable, sadly. Doesn't mean you don't have to try, because the exercise of thinking and coming up with new ideas is very important, but when it comes to sustainability, it's actually very hard. When the cellulose is separated, we dissolve it in chemistry. This is a circular process, so this is toxic. It's bad chemistry, but it's fully captured in the system. So the moment you have your cellulose dissolved and you're gonna spin it in through this kind of spaghetti, kind of pasta thing, then we reclaim the toxins from the fiber and we reuse it again. So that's fine. So meaning toxic chemicals are not bad. They're very important. We should not say, oh, no, it's important to use toxins. You just have to do it in a very, good way and make sure you don't pollute or you capture these things. So this is actually when you spin it, the cellulose is being aligned, and you basically get like this pasta type of rope, and that is being stretched on the machine, and then you get something very small. I bought a lot of samples, and I'm going to pass it around. It might happen that this reaches you at the end of the show, but that's okay. So one bag is the algae, other bag is what we actually made from the algae. There's a little bit of other cellulose in there as well. We couldn't do it with 100% algae. We had to mix, but that's fine. So this is what it basically looks like. Did some artwork. So the whole product, making a product, it simply doesn't really have a priority at our studio. Most time gets spent on the whole process. Of course, people ask us to design something with it. For me, it's not always relevant. Sometimes I collaborate with people who I think can make something very beautiful, and we do that. It's a bit of it's quite complicated. If you're a farmer, because that's sometimes what I am, that you're also asked to design something that can be shown on an exhibit. So sometimes I don't feel it, and then it's not happening. What I like a lot is this chart, because this is actually the sustainability impact of this material. So even though, let's say it differently. So we scrub a lot of CO2. So instead of costing CO2, on the right you have cotton, and on the left you have cladoforia with an average amount of cellulose or a high amount of cellulose. This depends on where you grow it and how you harvest it. And you can see that the nutrient uptake is fantastic. So we don't need much nutrients to grow this. Actually, it's negative compared to cotton. Then the greenhouse gas emitted is still fantastic. Water consumption is very low. But energy, you see, is very high energy intensive, which is, you're going to see this in a lot of innovation in the future. We need cheap energy, green energy to make all these things work. Because basically we're trying to mimic nature, and that typically costs a lot of energy. So if you can't get your electricity in a sustainable way, you can already doubt whether this is actually such an interesting thing to do. And the big problem now is that it's 5 times more expensive. So why would we do this? There is no reason for this. This is why this is not such a good idea at the moment. It's nice, it's there on the shelf, we might use it. But reality dictates that price is leading, and in a way it should also be. We have to also discuss the actual cost analysis. I don't know if you know the concept of actual cost. It means that the cotton that is priced at a certain price, say it's about 100 euros per ton when it comes off the field, that's actually not the price of that cotton, because you're not taking into account the nutrient uptake, the water use, the pollution of the land, the not fair labor cost, exactly the logistics. So actually that cotton is much more expensive. And until we start calculating with actual cost, these ideas will never be fruitful, because this is based on actual cost. So that's something that is going to haunt me in many projects. You will see that that's going to be a problem. Nevertheless, I'm an optimist, because I think we actually are moving in quite big steps. Seen on a larger time scale, I think we're doing quite well. We ruined it quickly, but I think we can also fix it quickly. So that's that's so life cycle assessment. This is an important terminology. It's going to be leading with any product developer. All my clients ask me when I come with an idea, where's your life cycle assessment? What can you tell me about that? So this is a new design parameter when it comes to me. So I'm going to run to about 7 or 8 projects. You can interrupt, please ask questions. I'm a relatively fast talker, and I tend to just run away with these things. So if you want to ask a question, just go ahead.
So the slide before,
Yeah.
I didn't quite get that. So the CO2 is
There's more CO2 uptake than there is emission in the processing in the making of the textile. Yeah.
So what was not disappointment with the result of it?
Well, the energy consumption and the cost. Yeah.
The energy consumption was the same as
Which is quite good, but you know, in some cases even more, which is not a big improvement in a way, especially not for investors. Yeah.
and the cost. Do you compare then the true price of your product with the true price of cotton?
Well, that's something I can say to the investors, but they say, well, yeah, that's not the reality of my world. You know, I can buy cotton for this amount, and I am not going to buy cotton for the actual amount. So that discussion ends quite quickly. Yeah, sadly enough. Yeah.
So you're saying that the price of your product is actually the true price because
Yeah.
it doesn't have so many negative effects.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the true price.
So the negative effects are included in the price, and so also the compensation. It's interesting if there would be carbon credits on algae, which there aren't, then we would do great, because that's how everything gets sold at the moment. It's carbon credits. So important system. Not sure how we end up there. We'll see where that goes. So I'm going to show you projects again. So this is about tulips, which is a fascinating Dutch thing. Centuries of heritage is in tulip farming. Actually, we do it for the bulbs and not for the flowers. The flowers you buy at Albert Heijn, if you buy tulips, they're not from the field. They're from a building, and they grow on water. They've not seen any dirt. These tulips you see here, it's about 11,000 hectares of tulips every year. This is me checking out tulips. This is about, well, there's 23,000 flowers, and there's about 12,000 hectares of tulips every year. And this is a horrible, horrible branch of agriculture. There's a lot of pesticides being used, a lot of water use, and the biodiversity in these fields is zero. And typically the area around these tulip farms is also quite heavily polluted, either with an excess of nutrients or indeed with toxins that are used to subdue some of these problematic pests that have. There's two organic farmers in Holland. One of them is John Huiberts. You might have, I think he was on one VPRO program, and he's quite an amazing person. And he's been doing organic tulip bulb farming now for 7 years, and currently he's doing better with his yields than his conventional agricultural partners. So, but it took him 7 years to prepare that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. The thing is with these tulips that every year around the end of April, beginning of May, there's this machine coming and chopping all these flowers. Because the farmers don't want the flowers, they want the bulbs. And in order to preserve the energy in the bulb, they cut the flower. And then it's there. So you have the Japanese and American tourists, you know, they take pictures, and before the next morning they wake up and everything is gone, which is always quite fun. But this, of course, inspired me because there's just so much of these things. And in the past, they used to take them out of the field and basically dig a hole and put those flowers in there and then cover it up. Nowadays, they don't do that anymore. They don't have to, because actually they use preservatives and chemicals to seal the top of the stem to shield it from fungus. Because the reason they used to take out the flowers is to prevent fungus from growing amongst it and then basically ruining the bulb. But because of the pesticides and the chemistry, that's not necessary anymore, so they leave them in the field, which is much easier for them. And I was inspired by this in 2016 already. So I wanted to do something with the tulip heads. And even without knowing exactly what I was going to do, I decided that I had to harvest them. So I rented a special machine that was basically for a different purpose. And I hired this machine to harvest 1 hectare of these tulip flowers. There's about 800,000 on a hectare. It's a substantial amount. I clearly wasn't really prepared for this type of volume. But yeah, so it's a costly machine. So I just told them to just keep on going. We did the same thing in 2019. Was it? Yeah, 19. Doesn't matter. I think 19. And we did on large scale, because I'll show you what I did with the project. But in 2019, I was asked by a large fashion brand to do this large scale in order for them to color their new fashion collection with that color pigment. Because pigment making is basically what we... Oh, it's a little movie. That's good. So this actual machine was used 60 years ago to do this in order to get the flowers out of the field. This machine was in storage with a farmer who hadn't used it for 50 years or 40 years because he got a new machine. And he was actually the guy that used to operate it when it was 30, 40 years ago. So it was so much fun to see him doing this process again. And the reason he's not chopping everything is because we are, in this case, trying to figure out how fast, how deep, etc. Because we want as much flower and as little stem as possible. My girlfriend is on top, checking out the flower harvest. It's a lot of fun. So we spent all day, and we did 6 hectares, which is about 3 million flower heads that day. So the fun thing about these farmers is that they dry their flowers, the bulbs, in August, September. So they have a drying facility in their farm, in their shed, which is doing nothing when we harvest flower heads. So we decided to use the facilities at the farmer to dry these flowers. And John Huiberts has a very nice way. He uses the sun on the roof. He has a special sunroof to dry his bulbs. So we could actually dry all our flower heads without the use of any gas, which is quite cool. And from these flower heads, we made our pigments. The cool thing about tulips is that they are genetically colored, right? So the flower is going to have the same color every year, which is it's quite easy for me, because then I can at least say every year I can provide the same color to the fashion brand, and we don't have to work with all those horrible natural differences where producers have such a hard time with. So you can see we've done many colors. At the end, we selected 3 tulips that were interesting for this chemical process that is being used by this fashion brand. The reason they asked me is because they have been able to do a more sustainable fixation of color. Because actually in your clothes, the color is not a big problem. It's more the fixating of color where the disgusting toxins actually come in. And they were able to do a much more sustainable process. And they asked me if we could combine those 2 projects to make it into a real good product. I can't say which brand. I hope next spring they're going to launch the collection. Yeah. We did many more tests, also wood staining. I mean, this is indeed your wet dream for a Dutch person, you know, wood clogs dyed with tulip pigment. Yeah. But yeah, and we did our own hemp coloring. This is what we did ourselves. I mean, the problem is in this fixation. All these natural colors, they always oxidize. You know, they always have issue with UV. So this is a really problematic thing. I like vibrant colors, so I have issue with that. However, it's also a designer's job to make sure that we appreciate the faded colors more. Especially in this case, a lot of browns. So let's hope browns are going to be fashionable one day. But yeah, this is one of the issues with that. There are exceptions, but in general, it's very difficult to keep color where you're not using toxins. So the fashion brand is using this project. And yes, this is greenwashing. This fashion brand is not sustainable yet. But I implore you to be a little bit gentle with the whole greenwashing campaign. You have excess things that should be banned, like Shell telling us that for 1 euro cent extra at the gas station, we can make Shell CO2 neutral. That is just criminal. But these companies, they need to be able to have this relationship with you as a consumer where they kind of say, okay, do you think this is okay for now? You know, is this sustainable enough? Are you willing to buy this? This is a give and take. We cannot get this change without these companies, and they need to, you know, be able to make you come, right? To make you buy their product. And this is when I was younger, sustainability in my household was brown coffee filters instead of white. This was the level of sustainability in my house. We did not know anything. And now we know much more. So you know, when you start learning more about sustainability, you start to be educated. You start to be more precise. And you can say when a brand is doing this and that, you can say, well, I used to believe that, but now I know better. So I'm not going to buy your product. I'm expecting a better story next time. So this is a process. We need to basically all educate ourselves, and including the brands, and that these things are changing. It's not a bad thing. It's part of where we are. Yeah. I'm expecting some negative comments now, but everybody's being polite, so that's okay. Let's quickly go to the easy things. So this is definitely one of my favorite plants. It's called a cattail, or and this is typically that grows a lot in Holland. It used to be an endangered species, which is ludicrous. You weren't allowed to pick this when I was a little kid, and the reason why is because it couldn't grow due to the amount of pesticides in the water. So that's the reason why it was quite rare. We've come a long way in Holland with the quality of our surface water. It's that you have now. You see now an occasional stork again. You see more frogs, more buzzards, more, and those almost disappeared from our land 30 years ago. Doesn't mean that we are still far, far, far away from any proper biodiverse climate in Holland. And this plant is actually supposed to help us. Because what's happening at the moment with farmers is that we have to give up a lot of grassland because we have to convert them to nature barriers between Natura 2000 areas and actually agricultural areas. So, and those grasslands, those agricultural lands, they have a lot of nutrients in them, too much nutrients. So you can't grow good nature on nutrient-rich ground. So you need to mine those. And the only way to get those nutrients out is to introduce water in the system, make it wet, and to have the first pioneers, which is this plant, come in and take the first layer of excess nutrients up. So when we start flooding all these fields, we get a lot of nutrients in the water, and we need to get rid of those because they're very polluting. And this is what you should have, meaning that you have going to have thousands of hectares of this plant in the coming decades that is going to be there. Farmers without the actual land that they used to harvest from, which was a lot of money. So we have to try and make something of this plant. I've been working on this plant for 6 years already. We have experimented with different ways of harvesting this plant, which is very hands-on. It's me being there, typically in November and December in the cold, figuring out how to, with my partners, I'm not doing it alone obviously, but figuring out how to harvest this plant, how to process it. So we actually used a grass dryery. So the grass dryeries, they mow our fields for the farmers. They produce either compact bales for cattle or pallets for cattle. And they stop operations typically in November. And the last week of operations, we push in all our cattail and they dry that. So we can use that cattail whole year round for our projects. And this is about 100 tons of wet material gets pushed in, and it gets pushed out like this in these bales. And this is the typical thing that this is what I thought of, because this is what I enjoy. Go. Exactly. We're not using the brown head. You would typically think that that is a product that is there. Let me see. We use the middle part, the stem, because that has actually the hollow chambers. And because this cattail is nowadays used mainly for insulation materials, actually the hollow chambers is very important. The brown part, the seed pod, basically, is actually not so useful at the moment for us. It's difficult to harvest. It's fluffy, which looks interesting at first sight, but then you go like, oh, what to do with it? They used to make clothing of it and bedding, but it's not very good at that because it absorbs a lot of water and it clumps. So, people say, oh, let's make a coat. Yes, we can. But after a few times of wearing, you're going to be really sad because it's going to keep your sweat nicely in there. So we do a lot of product development. So building materials. So this is an insulation panel we did. This is with mycelium. So how can we replace EPS? Piepschuim. So we can do a mixture of the cattail fiber and the mycelium. How does that work? And they use. I think I have. It doesn't matter. I'm missing a picture, I think. We also use it with a large building company in the north of Holland. We do small bits and we blow it into wall cavity as insulation. And we're going to do the first 25 houses this year, which have a full insulation with cattail. So we're getting close to actual implementation application. We calculated how much material we need to harvest next year. We need 15,000 cubic meters of this material in order to insulate 1,000 houses. So where are we going to get 15,000 cubic meters of this material? We need farmers to do this. We need to pay them to harvest this and to process it in such a way that we can use it. So the disconnect between us innovators, as you were saying, and farmers is huge. And there are a few farmers who are fully aware of the fact that they're not going to be food producers, but also material producers. But not many are. Most of them are still fixated on the fact that they aren't able to get their usual quotations and revenue, which is difficult, because I work a lot with farmers and it's a very complicated discussion. Another material we work a lot with is riet. It sounds so obvious. We have a lot of them in Holland, but not so much actually. The riet fields in Holland are declining. The little bit of riet that is there is always being used for beautiful roofs. So as a building material, as a material to experiment with, it's not so good. However, we have thousands of hectares of riet land, which is polluted, as a farmer would say, with other crops. And those riet is actually where we work on to work. Yeah, so typically it's used for this. We make the sandwich paneling. Oh, I have a lot of cattail. I'm forgetting, you have to ask for samples, otherwise it's... Wake up! So this is cattail. So this is a cattail insulation panel. The adhesive used in this adhesive, it's starch. So this is starch Z-mill adhesive that's used. It's okay if you break it. I'm not going to smile about it, but it's okay. I know it's fragile. And this is the riet, the sandwich panel. So for ProRail, we did some product innovation work, because ProRail is an interesting partner. So ProRail, for the people who don't know, it manages, yeah. Yeah, it's a 3.7 lambda, so it's actually close to conventional hemp, natural insulation. Exactly. Good question. It's about performance. Yeah. A starch, Z-mill. Yeah, yeah. It's good, but it's also complicated. But we'll get to that as well. So this is a riet panel, sandwich panel. The interesting thing about ProRail as a company is it maintains 3,000 kilometers of railway track. And railway track in Holland is not just the two metal parts, it's also the cascading bit on the side with typically a bit of a ditch where water is flowing. So they have riet, they have cattail, they have all these materials. So in my proposition to ProRail is that you have your farm where for your building materials right next to the track you own. So why would you ever buy something if you can actually get it from your own soil? So we did a reinterpretation and design intervention into a riet, which then became a sandwich panel. You can see we use the pulling strength of the fiber on the two outer sides. We use the tube as a maintainer of distance, a pressure, a layer that can actually withstand compression. So there you have quite a good sandwich panel. Also, this is bound with starch. Yeah. Also starch. Yeah. So that the name starch is going to come up a lot. We do a lot of biopolymer research, and one of the projects I'm going to show later is actually another company I run together with a company who's a starch modifier. So we have a lot of access to polymers which are 100% biodegradable, or 95 or 90 depending on our application. The one in the riet is 95% biodegradable. I would advise you not to throw it in your backyard, but if you do, nothing bad will happen. It will just not compose in half a year. It will take 2 years, but the connecting the crosslinks systems in there are not toxic, so your animals will not die. But yeah, still bring it to the normal waste disposal. So if I talk about ecological binders, I will tell you how much percent, because it makes a difference. Yeah. It's a cross-link. It's a synthetic, actually. So the cross-linking. So you have a lot of glucose lines. If you take potato starch and you paint it on the surface, you will see that there are cracks appearing in the glue, and that's because the cross-linking between the molecules is not happening. So to stabilize an adhesive, you need cross-linking, and there are natural cross-linkers, but not very performance heavy. So that's why we use synthetic cross-linkers to connect those sustainable things. Yeah. This is going to lead up to my most favorite project ever. Ta-da! This is peat bog. So in Holland we have a lot of peat bogs. Peat bogs are crucial for our ecosystem. Veenmos, veengebieden, for the people who are Dutch here. So the peat bogs in Holland, they're not plentiful, but they have a lot of CO2 captured in them. because over the centuries or thousands of years, these peat bogs have been accumulating peat moss and other plants, and they've basically compacted, and we've used that to fire our homes with, as part of peat as turf. But what has happened over the past century is that we have, for our farmers, we've drained the water from these areas, which made that we were sinking, and we're still sinking in Holland. So our landscape is getting tighter and tighter. And the biggest problem here at the moment is the CO2 emission. So about a third of CO2 emission in Holland is actually from soil, and it's accelerated when you dry out peat bogs. So that's why we have to try to keep these things wet. Not so wet that we get methane issues, but fast enough to make sure that it doesn't oxidize, and we keep the CO2 locked in the peat bogs. Because we need more peat bogs, again, the question is for me, what can we design with products that come from these peat bogs? Because it would be a fantasy to think that we can just flood things, have the ecosystem be, and just be happy. It always needs to create some sort of revenue, because we need to maintain these things. It costs a lot of money to make sure that we can have these ecosystems. So again, we need farmers. Again, we need innovations that coexist with nature and that are in balance with nature. So this is veenmos, sphagnum, peat moss. And this is just a remarkable plant. This is actually what our turf is made of. It's antibacterial. It used to be used as wound dressing in the First World War because of the fact that it has hardly any bacteria. So you can stuff it in your bloody wound and it doesn't infect you. And the reason is because it has a very high pH. It's a little bit acidic, and it basically means that a lot of the bacteria don't like to be there. So together with a German partner, I designed a diaper, a fully disposable diaper. Because what I found out in my studio is that if you take dry sphagnum, say take 20 grams of dry sphagnum, it can absorb 240 milliliters of water. It's a fantastic absorber, which makes sense because that's why we have peat bogs, right? Because they hold a lot of water. So, and it does it in 2 seconds. And this is something we did empirically in our studio. So just doing tests, like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. But we also got it certified by the university. So we actually have the proper testing data. And now we are developing, we have developed a fully compostable diaper pad for the use in daycare centers, where actually the babies can pee, and we don't have any disposable diapers anymore. And this is a startup that's going reasonably well. We weren't able to do this in Holland. So weirdly enough, we are doing it in America because they are actually interested in this at the moment, and in Holland it's been quite difficult. So yeah, it's interesting that all of a sudden you go to the other side of the world to do your thing. But they have the same problem with peat bogs there as we have here. Mussels, seashells, clams. This is also a fun thing. So in Holland we eat a lot of these things, and they come to land in Ierseke, which is on the southern west tip of Holland. And I think it's interesting. So this is a boilery. So the clams come here and they get boiled and they get canned, cannery, and then the shells are left over. And I was intrigued by the amount of these seashells. We have other shells, cockles, but which is the brown one, but this is actually the blue one. And what I did for ProRail is make a composite of this material. ProRail asked me to think about concrete, because they use concrete for everything, because ProRail is only about engineering. And if you're an engineer and you have concrete, you're like, oh, well, I can use concrete, because it's always good, it's always safe, it lasts forever, and, no harm done. Well, that's the problem. 6% of our CO2 emissions globally is concrete. So if you go to a station in Holland, you see those little round sitting elements, right, with the brown top. Well, that's concrete, and they asked me to replace that. Because why would you use concrete to sit on? That's just ridiculous. You should use concrete for this, because that makes sense to me, but not for stationsoutillages or furniture. So again, thanks to the biopolymer technology, we were able to break these shells, sift them out in different sizes, and bind them with a biopolymer. The first biopolymer we did was 100%, and then we brought it to ProRail and they started testing and they said, oh, well, this is not good enough. So now we're to 10% cross-linking. It's still biodegradable. It's just not something you would throw in your backyard, but you could reclaim the material and use it again in a similar application. So this is where we constantly slide the bar of sustainability in order to get somewhere. This is a difficult process sometimes for me as well, because I would love to make something that you could just throw, you know, somewhere and be happy with it. But it's actually almost impossible to do that. So yeah, if people tell you that it's fully compostable, yeah.
Do you in this phase also make agreements with ProRail that they will also do so?
Exactly. Well, that's another thing. It's not easy to do that, but yes, that's part of the process. And then I'm lucky with a company like ProRail because they are partly governance, right? So if they promise something, it's actually something that means something. With a lot of companies, they would make the promise, but then not do it. But for them, this is if they can recycle this, then it's also keeping their value, right? Because they don't have to get it again, and then they can basically reduce the cost as well. So that's the proposition there. Concrete is very difficult to recycle. It costs a lot of energy. This is much easier to recycle, and you could just cast it again and make it into a new element. So we did some of these. Actually, we've produced them. It was in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. It's our fucking backyard was the exhibition, and we had two. I made two of these stools for that exhibition. So we're getting there. The problem is that ProRail it's a difficult organization to work with because of those engineers. They think it's quite risky. And one of the issues we have now is they can't clean it with a high pressure washer, because it's not going to survive that. It's just too much. So they need to, you know, use a plumeau, something like that. So we also had to change the whole way of thinking about a product. But I don't understand why you design something that would last 100 years if you're only going to use it for 20 years. No? So we need to also find that balance. And that's also for architecture the thing. So how long, you know, you have the shell system, right? So which part are you going to design for 100 years, which part are you going to use for 15 years, and make sure that you design for the function and not like over-design too much. It's very harmful. What's in your backyard? So that's the theme of that. How am I on time? Go ahead. Oh, it's biodegradable, but it's not compostable. Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So what typically happens is that you're looking for a potential owner, somebody who wants to own this technology and product, and they would create the first objects, and they would have a maintenance contract with ProRail, and they would, for instance, say, okay, every 10 years we're going to come by, we're going to take it, and we're going to reproduce this product within our technology, and we're going to place one back. And for this service, you will pay a certain amount of money. So that would be the system. It's not great, because after a while, you need to still add some of these chemistry, and it's still a lot of energy involved, but at least you have a circularity there. So that's where we are now. I think in 10 years we can do better, but at the moment we can't. Yeah. So we are testing at the moment, but I think if it's just there on the station, right, and nobody sits on it, it's about 20 years. Yeah. I think 20 years is fair. So it's also what's acceptable from an aesthetic perspective, right? So what do you accept as pro as what's the wear pattern? You know, how does it look? Perhaps the application there is not perfect, and you have to find a different application where the aesthetics are perhaps less problematic. So also for me as a designer, I also have to give in. This is not about creating the most pretty products, it's about finding the sweet spot where this technology at the level of this development can actually perform at its maximum. And I enjoy that. That's why I'm not going to design a cool chair for a design fair with this. It makes no sense to me. For me, it would be much more fun to design something that is very specifically suitable for a niche. Right? I brought some samples there. Again, you have to ask. I would like to throw this, but that's going to be... Oh, I'm going to... There you go. I've got another one. So as you can hear, it's quite a complex process, and there is no maximum optimized outcome, which is sometimes difficult for designers or idealists, to accept the fact that you can't have it at the moment. It's very difficult. Yeah. This is about potato starch, Huisvendam Biolaminates. So this is another company. I have 3 companies at the moment because I come up with ideas and I try to make it into a successful company. So I'm forced to be an entrepreneur as well. It's not necessarily that I enjoy it, but it's the only way, sometimes for things to happen. So this is actually quite a successful company. And the goal of biolaminates is that we basically try to replace HPL, high pressure laminates, right? When you go into an office, you have all these desks and every layer there is a high pressure laminate, which is basically 20 layers of paper with epoxy resin, high pressure. And that is, of course, very toxic and very difficult to recycle. So our goal was to replace that with starch as the basic technology, starch. So I did this project in 2013 for the first time, based on potato peel. We have a lot of potatoes in Holland. Actually, it's interesting to know that we have the highest yield per plant in the world. We are extremely successful at growing potatoes. We do this in the north of Holland mainly, and because of the amazing clay we have there, we can actually grow amazing potatoes. It makes no sense to me to turn that area into nature. I get the romantic thought, but if you can generate so much food from that area, please, it gives me goosebumps. People would suggest to sacrifice extremely good agricultural land for something like a nature reserve. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. Then the tulip farms, we can do something about that. But potatoes are crucial to our lives. So this is also a discussion we need to have. That's why the farmers are so angry, right? Yeah. If they start growing tulips or lilies, then yeah, please tell them to stop. Or corn for plastic, which is also a bit of a thing. But as long as they do potatoes for food, we have to be a little bit milder there. Anyways, there's the potato peeling process. It's a huge steam cooker. The potatoes go in. The temperature is 400 degrees. The peel just blows off the potato, and we use the potato for the chips. And the peel, so this little tiny fiber, is actually left over, and we squeeze that, and all the water that comes from that process is where we take the starch from that we use to produce our laminates. So we also use reclaimed starch. So we don't use the actual potatoes to make starch, but the peels and the water. So I have the peels, I have the starch, which is kind of a whitish glue. We mix, we press, and we have a layer of what we call a biolaminate. And I brought those as well. Now we do it with grass and straw and 100 other materials, which we compress into this aesthetic layer. So in 2013, at the Dutch Design Week, I presented my concept as a designer. I was already collaborating with this starch company, but they were not convinced because these are hardcore industrial guys. They don't really get the artistic side. So I thought, okay, that's fine, but let me just generate my vision on your product and let me present it. And when we have the feedback from the audience and the market, we can discuss whether we continue. So here you have a library of 120 different fibers, which have all turned into a biolaminate. This was quite successful, and therefore we started the company, and we also worked at Atelier Luma in the south of France, where we converted their local resources, fibers. So not only potato peel, but pine needles, rice husk, algae, but even seashells into a laminate like so. And I've got some more. Then we also introduce color. You have to pass it to the rear as well. I'm afraid. Yeah. So now we introduce color, which is just basically a natural mineral. We get, in some cases, we can get it locally. In some cases, it comes from France. So that is debatable, whether you think that's sustainable or not. But at least it increases the amount of color options. In this material, you see about 50% is fiber and 50% is binder and mineral. So that's roughly the mixture. As you can see, it's only the top layer. You can ask, why won't you make a thick layer? Because now there is wood. Because the thick layer is actually a problem for us. If we would make a thick layer, because starch is water-based, we would have to evaporate water. And you can only do that with a lot of heat, and heat means a lot of energy. So if you're going to do that, you might as well use the conventional system we have now, because sustainability-wise, you're not making any difference. So that's why we say, okay, where's the problem? It's the top layer, it's the HPL. Let's try and replace that bit. And we're getting close to replacing that. That takes about 5 years of innovation to make sure that we come a little bit closer to the scratch resistability of HPL. We're not there yet, and I'm not sure if we're going to get there exactly without adding polyurethane, because that's what you do. If you want to make it great, successful, and resistant, you add polyurethane, and that's a problem when you want to recycle. It's quite chemical, this lecture. Are you still following? Yeah, good. I'm a designer, but yeah, so yeah, we did some shows in Milan there as well. Last show we did, which was fun, was in Den Haag, in Mauritshuis, where we did some of the paneling for the Dutch masters. Of course, this is beautiful. So I mean, it's also fun to make something that is beautiful. Way too expensive. Let's forget about it. But it is beautiful. This is tulips. Yeah, I forget to say, but these are tulips. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can see why, you know. But yeah, yeah. Because we sell it so expensive. Well, well, that's a bit like with any innovation. At the moment, we're around 150 euros per square meter, so that's quite expensive. When you look at raw material calculations, at the end, you're going to be quite close to what's happening now in the conventional market, because from a raw material perspective, or whether it's glycerin or oil, whether it's a starch or a polyurethane, it's all in a certain amount of price per tonnage. So there is not a big difference there. It's about production volume and capacity. So it's easy to make a lot of polyurethane. It's very difficult to make a smaller batch of starch. So the industry has to catch up. Yeah.
But then it's a temporary problem.
It is a temporary problem. Exactly. It is. It's making sure. I don't want to sound as a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not. But it's about shareholders. It's about making most from the machines you have as a large company. So why would you do the transition? This is making you money. So this is why it's so difficult. Yeah. Legislation is important, because otherwise, Mr. Timmermans, it is important that he does these things, because otherwise the companies are not going to change. This whole concept of self-regulating market, it's not working, or at least not fast enough. No. We should all be farmers. I think this is definitely true. We should all be farmers. I mean, I'm looking to you as well. I mean, you know, you have some ground, some nice places where we should do a little bit of farming. Yeah. We should not all be conventional farmers, though. So you have to start talking to the farmers at the moment to see how you can perhaps assist them in this change. The last project, I think it's the last project, yeah. And this is also the longest running project. It's called Palm Leather, and it's something I started in 2010, so that's like a very long time ago. Oh, I have some tulip pigments as well. Oh, go on. Okay, you can open it, it's not harmful. You can smell it, you can even eat it, because I have a food certification on it. We needed to do that because we had to prove that we weren't toxic. So you can just dip your finger out and it's not. Actually, you should. If you go to the tulip fields in Holland, take the organic tulip fields, pick some leaves, put them in your salad. It's like mierikswortel, right? It's a little bit sharp to the flavor. It's very nice. Thank you. So that is nice. So yeah. I will see you have done that when you. It doesn't smell so good, but not even. Yeah. Yeah, it gets brings you back. Yeah, so palm leather is India. So this is also, it's so long ago I can hardly even remember where it started, but which is not entirely true, but I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things that were very relevant at the time, but are over the years have become relevant. So this is about the areca palm. So not the oil palm, not the date palm, it's a areca betel nut. And the betel nut is a nut that's used in Indian cuisine quite often, and they have plantations, but also natural growth throughout India. I think it's about 3 billion trees in India. And every year, throughout the year, typically in October, November, about 5 to 10 of these leaves shed. The palm grows, the leaves are shed, and the husk around that leaf, which is the green sleeve you have here on your right, that's actually the part that separates. So the rings of the palm tree are actually generated by the separation of the husk leaf and falls to the ground. So this is one of these leaves, and so there are billions of them every year. 95% of them are not used, they're just left in the field. 5% or a little bit less is used for firewood, and 0.01% is used for these little plates you get when you go to a festival. You have those wooden plates. Those are made from areca leaf, and it's a very small amount, but that's how I ran into them. And then I thought, oh wow, that's amazing. So Mother Nature makes basically a fiber sheet for me, because they get up to 1 square meter. And I just think it's amazing that you have an alignment of fibers of 1 meter long just across a whole sheet. And it's roughly the even thickness. So I'm like, okay, we should do something with that. The problem is that it's very brittle. It is very brittle. And that's also why nobody works with it, because it breaks very easily. I also noticed that when I got them to Holland, because I found an Indian person and he sent me leaves. It cost me 300 euros, which is now I think is crazy, but at the time it was fine. And then I just discovered it's very brittle and not very useful. However, we started experimenting with it anyways. And what I did is very simple. I made a mixture of water and glycerin. Yes, I have all sorts of stuff there. The white doves are coming. The white doves are coming as well. But this, what I did is making a mixture of water and glycerin. So glycerin is a plant fat. It dissolves in water. And that's why in India we put all these dry leaves in this huge amount of these blue barrels. We put those leaves in. We leave them for 4 days. When they're totally soaked, we take them out. We hang them in the Indian sun. Because water evaporates quicker than fat, you basically keep the fat in the plant cell, and that keeps the flexibility of the leaf. And this leaf's about 3 years old, and it's still flexible. Yeah, so it's a little bit leather-like. It's not like leather, but it's leather-like, and that's why it's called palm leather. I decided to go to India and start my own factory, which was a bad idea, but it was a fantastic adventure. I took my own money, a one-way trip for that money. But I made many friends, and some of these people still work for me. And some of these people I still know and consider my friends. This factory in Gadak has stopped. I put the bar too high. As you can see, I also wanted to work with women, which was just at the moment too difficult for me, because I just needed to focus on knowledge transfer. And working only with women was difficult, because these ladies can only work 4 hours a day, because they have kids and husbands to feed. So this is also about empowering women. And as a Dutch boy, I had no idea. So I ran into problems, cultural differences that I wasn't aware of and not prepared for. Now I am more. Anyways, this factory stopped, and now we have another factory, and that is actually still running and growing quite rapidly, which makes me very proud. Yeah, this was beardless me. Exactly. Yeah. So this is 2012. So what I loved about this process is working with craft people. So this lady and all the ladies we work with, they're specialists in cotton manufacturing. They stitch garments. And they were very insulted when I started the training, because for them this leaf is waste. So when I came with my leaves and I put them on the table and said, oh, we're going to work with this, being super proud. They're like, no. We're not going to work with that. It took some convincing. But the nice thing about working with craft people is that after a while, you see this beautiful process of eye-hand coordination, right? And about quality checking and about verifying quality within the material. And within a few days, this lady was able to select the different qualities of palm leather, so we could make this little sandal. So this is the first product we made, and this is, I'm going to give it to you again, yeah? Yeah. So this is a little sandal, and I think I have a picture of that. And this was my first attempt to change the world, and I was still an idealist at that time. It's 2012, and one of the products I truly hate, still to this day, is the little white sandal you get in hotels, right? Or saunas, right? It's the little white chapel. And the problem with this product is that it's a combination of 6 materials pressed into one little product that you probably use for an hour and then throw away. So this is linear use at its maximum. Beautiful materials that are wasted because you can't recycle them. Even if you would have the technology and the money, you wouldn't be able to get these things apart. So my plot to you is please don't use those things anymore. It's really bad. This was my attempt to do it better. So there's no glue in this sandal, it's just stitched. And we use cross-laminating of fibers to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. You can see. And this, the reason the little weird thing there on the toe is there, because I want it flat packed. So we have a little bit of cotton there to make sure that you can flat pack it. At the end, I think we sold about 2,000 in total, not that much. Now we make another one with a cotton strap. We sell more of those. The reason this didn't work is because it was still quite expensive, about €2.50 per pair. And the little white one is about 40 cents. And you get your logo and you get your nice packaging. So at the end of the day, it's very difficult for us to make money on these products. But now, because sustainability is such a big thing, you see that these it's changing slowly. This is just a relic of my design career now, but I really like it a lot still, also as a design. This is also about greenwashing again. This is my flirtation with the big shoe brands. This is O'Neill. O'Neill, you know, from wetsuits, you know, a lot of rubber and plastic. They came to me, can we use your palm leather to make a sustainable sandal? This was the process. And I said, well, no, you can't do that because it's a shitty material. You can't make a high performance sandal with this. It's, you know, you can make a disposable sandal, but you can't actually make a proper women's footwear sandal that lasts for at least 2 seasons. But we can't make it sustainable, but we can actually make a product with palm leather. So we started designing together, and this is actually what came out. We made 2,000 of these. Now, this is not a sustainable product because there is rubber and EVA in here. And especially EVA, that's in all our footwear, the bouncy part, that is actually a very polluting part of footwear. So I told them, if you're going to sell this, you can't use the word sustainable because it's going to kill my career. Right? I mean, I'm supposed to be a sustainable designer. So they did not use that in campaign, which I'm very happy because it's a bit of a scary ask. You know, if you have such a giant and you can work with them and they're going to pay stuff, but you can't really do this from a sustainability perspective. I wanted to do this. I really, really wanted to work with these people because when it comes to impact, if you do not collaborate with these big brands, your idea is not going to fly. You need to have that. They were so nice that I could send a bunch of my shitty material to Indonesia, have a full production run in a big shoe manufacturer where all these specialists had a crack at how to implement this in footwear. Now, that's golden. So if you're a sustainable designer and you get a chance to work with evil, just do it. I mean, it's so interesting. You learn so much. And the cool thing is that now we're designing 2.0, and we make a large step in the sustainability there because they've also learned how to work with these materials. A good reason for these shoes for these companies not to work with you is because you're a liability. And their designers and their manufacturing engineers, they don't know how to work with these materials. So you have to help them also, no? So don't get off your high horse and just do that and explain it like this when you're asked how it works. Yeah. Product development is still a lot of fun. I am a product designer. I just spend 90% of my time developing materials in order to design a better product. And rugs and carpets is the next application we did with palm leather. And this is one of the things. So this is a carpet, right? So it's either for wall covering or flooring. And this is where it becomes interesting. This is going to be in concept cars. Now that's horrible, but it's, yeah. Because why would you ever introduce a natural material in a car? It makes absolutely no sense. A car is a perfect example of a very well recycled product where you should only use the high performance plastics so that when the sun shines and it's 70 degrees, it doesn't melt, it doesn't get ruined. Stop putting natural materials in cars. So this is what discussion I had with Hyundai. But they, of course, want to show to their clients that they are very sustainable. So they want to. So yeah, we did that. Luckily for me, Corona happened, and the whole product was cancelled due to all the fairs were cancelled. And I think I was happy with that, even though it was my 15 seconds of fame in concept cars, because most designers like to do concept cars because it's a big thing. But yeah, I'm not sure. whether I want to. Anyways, architects like this because of the acoustic qualities it has, so that's nice. And I like it because it's another product that we can make from the same palm leaf, and it looks a little bit like vertical. Yeah. Well, so yeah, we use it in flooring, but then you should see it definitely in the soft areas of your house. I have a few in my house just to test them. And you know, when I come in with my high heels, it doesn't really work. But when I'm just barefoot, it's fantastic. So that's where it is. And acoustic properties is also very good. At the moment, we're in the process of getting the fire certificates, no? Because if you start covering Congress halls with flammable materials. So yeah, they have to, and then you get the introduction of chemicals again. So it's a little bit difficult sometimes. But as an acoustic material, also because its pliability, it's quite nice. And also interesting, we've made most of the materials in Holland, but now we're trying to implement this in India. So then we can also produce that in India, and that knowledge transfer takes a little bit of time. Yeah. Not so good. No. You can compare, well, these things, that's also a nice thing, also with the sandals. So if I give people that sandal, the first thing they do is they almost lick it, but they definitely smell it, right? Because it's so new, and you see people always do this. Well, when I give you a white sandal like you get in a hotel, you're not going to sniff it. You're kind of going to accept it for what it is. And the same with these materials. Yes, it's not very good with water, but the same goes for your woolen carpet, right? So at the end of the day, it's also what's your reference and how you perceive these things. So yeah. But good question. It's not so good with water. The last slide, I think, is this slide, because this is where I think this is where the fun is. So you know PETA, right? PETA is this quite radical animal rights organization, and they free rabbits, etc. And without me knowing, they gave me the Innovation Award, which I'm happy with, because this is, of course, a vegan product. I've never branded it as vegan, but you can deduct that it's vegan. And because vegan is a buzzword that makes sense to a lot of consumers, we call this vegan now. So I'm a vegan designer. I used to be the savior of craft, and now I'm a vegan designer. So yeah, it's what's in the name. No? So I was very happy with that, because it actually makes sense. I like PETA, and I think it's fantastic. So I'm very happy I post this on my LinkedIn. And of course, there's the obligatory thumbs up for many people, family mainly, which is fine. But there's one guy, Frans van den Heuvel, was a self-proclaimed pensionado. So he's already, yeah. So he's a little bit older. He's probably, I think, like 68, 70, no? And he gives me all shit, right? And I didn't put the C more because it gets worse there. So I'm like, oh, well, that's fine. You know, I mean, I'm used to that. I'm okay with that. If we would have a private conversation, I could tell him exactly why it makes sense. But what actually struck me is that everybody gets 1 like from me. Thank you for it. He gets 13 likes. What's happening? So, and I'm checking this, and all these people are basically affiliated, connected to the leather industry, to the conventional industry. So that's why he gets so much likes. And that's just striking. This is not a competition for leather. Don't be ridiculous. They're just angry because I use the word leather. They think it damages their brand. Well, your brand should be damaged because leather is a very problematic material, and we need to get rid of most of the applications for leather. So, I mean, it's silly. So for me, this is exactly where I know I'm doing well. If these kind of things happen to me, then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tjeerd. Yeah, I think by far this was the most hands-on and most practical Schools Out event that we ever had. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Everyone paid really good attention, so now we all know how to make palm leather and everything. Well, there were some questions already, but maybe, yeah, there's a question right there. Can you scream or no?
Yeah, you could shout.
Yeah.
educating them that everyone does. I mean, it's a good thing.
That's a good point. So I used to I have two patents. When I stopped school and I did my first inventions, I thought had gold. Therefore, I patented, thinking to become rich. It never happened, which is okay. I think patents are very useful, and in some cases you should patent things. I don't have to patent things. I'm fine with open source. Palm leather is open source. My partner in India tries to get it patented in India. I'm trying to stop him from getting patents. He tells me he wants a patent because then he can get investments, because now he can't grow. So now he's telling Tjeerd, I need this because otherwise it doesn't work. So we are in this battle. If you take a patent because you think you're being very original and good and smart, that's probably the wrong reason, because there are like-minded people everywhere in the world and everybody's close to the same thing, especially when it comes to enzymes, biopolymers, it's all happening. But a patent is definitely indeed important for economy of scale, because then you can bring the money in. I just hope in some cases that it's not necessary, and palm leather should be the example of that. To make that it can actually work bottom up. But yeah, it's an experiment. Correct. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, that's a possibility. Especially you can see that, of course, with biopolymers coming from corn, for instance. That indeed the plastic from corn becomes more important than actual corn. That you wake up in the morning and the field outside your window is not for food, but actually for products. This happens. We're not there yet. I would say let that happen. The moment we are in such a transition that we actually need those fibers of food in such a way that we get competition, I think we're on the right track. So I would prefer that first to happen before we address that truly as a problem. And even with biopolymers, I think that's the case. I don't know if you all know the difference between bio-based, what bio-based means, because it's a buzzword at the moment. Bio-based does say nothing about biodegradability or compostability. It only says that it's not made from oil, but from organic plant resources. So if you have plastic from corn, it's not necessarily sustainable. The only thing there is that it doesn't use oil. So if they start making regular plastics based on corn, then we're not really making much advance there. It's making compostables from corn. I think that's perfectly fine. Then let's do that first before we run into problems. Yeah. 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 This weekend I was in Portugal watching bamboo plantations starting there because the soil there is so low in quality that nothing grows, but bamboo does. So we could get a lot of building materials there. So I think in many ways, it's about protecting what nature still is and creating more efficiency in a non-harmful way with the land we have at the moment. But that's a personal opinion. I don't mind people having a different opinion about that. I don't know which one is the best. So yeah.
Any other word?
Yeah. I was wondering the collaboration you have, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of knowledge of chemistry involved, and how is the collaboration with you and other partners, and how do you you do your projects with
how you get knowledgeable as well. How do you obtain this knowledge? Well, typically I get to learn a little bit. I don't get to learn everything, either because I lack the intelligence of chemistry or they're not going to tell me. But the few things I ask is that I need to see what's in it. And this is just a list of chemistry, so I can decide whether it's sustainable enough for me to work with. And there's a lot of self-learning. I know much more about the chemistry than I used to, so I do a lot of learning. But I'm not a high-end chemist. about cellulose, biopolymers. In that realm, I'm qualified now to make some educated decisions, but it took a while, to get that knowledge. I didn't take any classes. It was just a lot of self-research. Yeah.
Learning by doing.
Yeah, learning by doing and actually reading still a lot. Yeah. Going to conferences as well. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
One more, great.
One more.
I find it interesting that what speaks mostly to about the presentation is not necessarily the materials you use, but more so your thinking and the innovative process that you're using while doing it.
Exactly.
What do you think is the most important about that kind of thinking that we can use as designers?
Well, that's good.
I think we're all kind of different designers maybe.
Exactly.
Yourself, a industrial designer. I mean, student. So like,
Yeah.
what do you think the best way to go about that?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a good question. It's also it's not so much difficult to answer, but it's quite a long. So let's have another lecture. I'm actually trying to do my PhD on this topic. So how designers, whether it's architects or designers, can actually influence sustainable transition. What is the specific quality we have as creatives that we can assist these transition in happening on a proper way or faster? And I think it's definitely our creative brain. So we have an overview. We are able to accumulate and to look in a wider approach on things, which is very difficult for a specialist, an engineer. Typically, we're more all round, which is good. Also, we have good understanding of our way of thinking, our creative thinking process. In our studio, we take meticulous track of every moment we make a decision in the creative process. Because making a decision means you're going one way and not the other way. And if you track that continuously, you have a beautiful map of how you came to this conclusion. And then when you have doubts, you can also go back. So it's also about using the creative process to do this. And then it's also, and this is about the boundary objects, as we call them. So if you have stakeholders, a complex group of people that you need to fulfill your ideals, they all talk different languages. They all have different morals and ideals. So as a designer, my job is to make sure they can communicate. So I try to design the product, the prototype, whatever it is that connects these different stakeholders. And I think that's one of the most important tasks I have by giving these samples out, that people can actually understand, use their own lingo to discuss this object. And then it's my job to make sure that the moral and the ideals are the same at the farmer's end as well as the user's end. So that's basically where the creative process is very important. Yeah. So I call myself a value chain designer. That's what it is now. Next week it might be different again, but now is this. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
very last one, and then
Thank you very much for showing us all the range of the products that you are working on.
Oh.
And I was wondering, it was very inspiring, and I was wondering which of the products do you think it's the furthest in the process to be introduced on the market on the biggest scale?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that will be the biolaminates. Yeah. Yeah, there is. The biolaminates are there. So the ones with little boards, we are there at the sweet spot. We have the fire resist, we have the VOC reports, we have everything there. We could scale up if we want. That's there. But a lot of the other things are, that takes a little bit longer. Yeah. It takes about 5 to 10 years, in my opinion, from conception to implementation on large scale. So that's the
color, the pigment
Yeah.
will also be further.
Yeah, develop more difference in colors. Yeah, not so much different, because then we have to use chemical coloring, and now so it's going to be quite boring. Yeah.
any further questions, save them until later. No, thanks again, Tjeerd, for this. I thought it was very insightful, very generous of you to share everything in detail, and also a lot of things, not only the practical, the chemical, or the aesthetic, but also some things that I never thought about. Your plea for greenwashing, for instance. We'll talk about that later. I never thought about it in this way. But